Hi, I'm Amelia, and I've never been good at keeping quiet, especially when faced with injustice. My father-in-law, a man I once admired, decided to use his moment of glory, his Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony, to publicly humiliate me. He thought he was teaching me a lesson, but all he did was plant a seed of something far more potent, a surprise he would never see coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The grand ballroom of the Omni Hotel reeked of expensive perfume, stale champagne, and the nervous anticipation of 1,000 eager attendees. My heels, chosen with painstaking care, echoed a hollow rhythm against the polished marble as I navigated the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of my father-in-law, Victor Sterling, a titan in the local real estate world. He was receiving the coveted Legacy Builder Award, and my husband, David, had insisted we be there, front and center. I wore a shimmering emerald gown, a silent protest against the muted tones of the usual Sterling family attire, and on my wrist, a delicate silver bracelet David had given me on our first anniversary. It felt heavy tonight, a tangible reminder of the connection that had tethered me to this often unwelcoming family. Rows of impeccably dressed guests whispered amongst themselves, their hushed tones like a low hum. Victor's inner circle, a collection of local politicians, wealthy developers, and socialites, occupied the tables nearest the stage. David and I were seated at a table further back, a subtle but unmistakable demotion. Victor's other daughter, Serafina, and her husband, Marcus, sat at a prime table near the podium, looking every inch the golden couple, their smiles as bright and artificial as the chandeliers overhead. Serafina, always immaculately coiffed, gave me a brief, dismissive glance, a micro-expression of disdain that spoke volumes. It was as if I were a smudge on the pristine glass of their family portrait. David, sensing my discomfort, squeezed my hand, but his eyes were fixed on the stage. Eager to witness his father's triumph, the master of ceremonies, a local news anchor with a practiced, booming voice, began the introductions. He rattled off Victor's achievements, each accolade met with polite applause. Then, it was time for the award presentation. Victor, a man who commanded attention even in a crowd, strode to the podium, his silver hair catching the spotlights. He was a force, charismatic and intimidating, his presence filling the vast room. He began his acceptance speech with the usual pleasantries, thanking his colleagues, his board, and his dedicated team. Then, his eyes, sharp and calculating, swept over the audience, landing on me. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a precursor to the venom I knew was coming. And of course, Victor's voice boomed, amplified by the sound system. I must acknowledge my family. My wonderful son, David, who has always been a pillar of support, and my brilliant daughter, Serafina, who embodies the future of our legacy. He paused, a dramatic silence hanging in the air. They, along with Marcus, truly understand the meaning of dedication and continuity. They are the true inheritors of the Sterling vision. My heart hammered against my ribs. He hadn't mentioned me. Not a single word. It was a calculated exclusion, designed to make me feel invisible. David shifted uncomfortably beside me, his grip on my hand loosening. I felt a flush creep up my neck, a hot wave of embarrassment washing over me. This wasn't an oversight, it was a deliberate, public erasure. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry, the emerald gown feeling less like a statement and more like a spotlight on my humiliation. The service continued, Victor basking in the adulation, his words painting a picture of a perfect family, a family that, in his eyes, did not include me. I could have been a ghost for all the recognition I received. After the closing remarks, people began to filter out, their polite murmurs filling the space. David, looking apologetic, leaned in. "I'm so sorry, Amelia. I don't know why he did that." I just shook my head, unable to speak. Serafina, ever the predator, spotted me lingering by the exit. She glided over, her smile saccharine. "Amelia, darling, you're still here? I thought you'd have rushed off. Daddy was quite specific, wasn't he?" Her voice, usually sharp, was laced with an exaggerated sweetness that made my skin crawl. "He left the future to us," she continued, "to David and me. Your name, dear, just isn't part of the narrative anymore." My hands clenched, my nails digging into my palms. It was a thinly veiled threat, a confirmation of my deepest fears. I didn't answer, just turned and walked out of the ballroom, the cool night air a welcome balm against the heat of my anger. The valet brought my car, and I pulled away, the dazzling lights of the hotel shrinking in my rearview mirror, leaving behind the bitter taste of public humiliation. I drove aimlessly through the city, the familiar streets blurred by the unshed tears stinging my eyes. The humiliation of the award ceremony festered, a burning coal in my chest. David's apologies, while sincere, felt hollow, unable to mend the gaping wound Victor had inflicted. I ended up at a quiet park overlooking the river, the only sounds. The gentle lapping of water and the distant hum of city traffic. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of my phone. The emerald gown now seemed a cruel joke. My father-in-law had systematically tried to erase me, not just from his speech, but from the very fabric of the Sterling family. He saw me as an outsider, a temporary attachment to his son, not a permanent fixture. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was an email from Mr. Henderson, the Sterling family's longtime attorney. The subject line read, "Urgent, Sterling Family Trust Update." My heart dropped to my stomach. Victor Sterling had established a family trust years ago, an opaque labyrinth of assets and properties, ostensibly for the benefit of all direct family members. He always prided himself on his fairness, a word that now tasted like ash in my mouth. I opened the email, my fingers trembling slightly. Mr. Henderson's message was curt, formal. "Dear Ms. Davis, as per the recent amendment to the Sterling Family Trust, dated 2 weeks prior to the Legacy Builder Award ceremony, your spousal beneficiary status has been revoked. All account management access has been reassigned to Mr. David Sterling and Ms. Serafina Sterling." The words blurred, then sharpened into a devastating clarity. Revoked. Reassigned. It wasn't just public humiliation. It was financial disinheritance. Victor hadn't just slighted me, he had cut me off completely. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. The river's current seemed to mock my stillness. It wasn't just the trust, it was everything. My name erased from his legacy, from his will, and now, from the financial security that was supposed to be part of my marriage to David. I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, as the city lights began to twinkle across the water. The carefully constructed facade of my life as a Sterling suddenly crumbled around me. I had married into this family, believing in the promises of love and belonging. Now, I was nothing more than a discarded accessory. The bitterness that had simmered within me since the ceremony intensified, solidifying into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just angry, I was determined. Victor Sterling had made a fatal mistake. He had underestimated me. He had assumed I would simply fade away, a quiet victim of his calculated cruelty. As I stared at the email, a memory surfaced. Weeks ago, during a rare, private conversation, David's grandmother, Amelia Sterling, had pulled me aside. Amelia, Victor's mother, was a formidable woman in her own right, with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. She had always treated me with a quiet kindness, a stark contrast to Victor's overt disapproval. "Amelia," she'd said, her voice a low conspiratorial whisper, "my son is a man who likes control. He'll try to corner you, to make you feel small. But remember this, true worth isn't given, it's taken." And sometimes, she'd leaned closer, her eyes twinkling, "The biggest secrets are hidden in plain sight, especially when you think everything is lost." She had then pressed a small, intricately carved wooden bird into my hand, a robin, much like the one my father-in-law had described in his speech as a symbol of the Sterling family. "This belonged to your great-grandmother-in-law," she'd explained. "It's supposed to bring luck. Don't lose it." I hadn't thought much of it at the time, dismissing it as a sweet, albeit cryptic, gesture. Now, holding the email, the wooden bird felt significant, a tiny, tangible piece of a puzzle I was only just beginning to put together. I tucked the bird into my purse, its smooth surface a comforting presence against my fingertips. I had to go back to the Sterling estate, not to beg for scraps, but to find what Victor had so carefully hidden. He thought he had erased me, but he had merely illuminated the path to his own undoing. I started the car, the humiliation replaced by a fierce, quiet purpose. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Sterling estate loomed in the pre-dawn light, a sprawling monument to old money and carefully maintained appearances. I parked my car a discreet distance away, the dark expanse of the private lane concealing my approach. The house stood silent, its grand facade betraying no hint of the turmoil within its walls. I had no key, no official access. But I had something more valuable, a quiet intuition, sharpened by betrayal, and Alara's cryptic words echoing in my mind. The biggest secrets are hidden in plain sight, especially when you think everything is lost. I crept through the lush, manicured gardens, the dew-kissed grass cool beneath my heels. My breath hitched as I approached the familiar rose garden, a place Victor often frequented, ostensibly to admire the blooms but more often to conduct hushed phone calls or engage in secretive conversations. There, nestled amongst the thorny bushes, was an old, wrought-iron bench, almost swallowed by the overgrown climbing roses. It was a relic from the original estate, a piece of history Victor had grudgingly kept, despite his penchant for modernizing everything. I remembered him always looking at it with a strange mix of disdain and something else. Almost a reverence. He often told David and Serafina that it was a nuisance, a reminder of a bygone era, yet he never had it removed. I ran my hand along the cold, aged metal of the bench. It felt rough, unyielding, but there was a subtle unevenness to one of the slats on the seat. My fingers probed, searching, and then, a faint click. It was a small, almost imperceptible latch, hidden beneath years of grime and rust. My heart pounded with a mix of trepidation and exhilaration. Could this be it? With a gentle push, the slat shifted, revealing a narrow, hidden compartment. Inside, wrapped in a faded velvet cloth, was a small, ornate wooden box. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid, revealing a single, yellowed envelope and a small, antique silver key. The envelope bore no name, no address, just a single, elegantly scripted initial, E. Alara. I carefully pulled out the contents. There was a folded sheet of brittle paper, and a faint, almost floral scent clung to it. The note, written in Alara's distinctive, elegant hand, read, "Amelia, my dear. If you are reading this, it means Victor has played his hand. He always believed power was about what you took. I believe it's about what you protect. This, my child, is your protection. The key belongs to the old study desk in the west wing. The one with the double lock. Go to the third drawer down on the right. You'll understand. You are stronger than you know." My hands trembled as I refolded the note and tucked the key and the wooden bird into my coat pocket. The chill of the pre-dawn air no longer bothered me, a fire had ignited within. Victor's public humiliation, his calculated disinheritance, it all made sense now. He had been trying to drive me away, to break me, so I wouldn't uncover his carefully guarded secrets. But Alara, with her quiet strength and keen observation, had foreseen his machinations. She hadn't just given me a clue. She had given me a weapon. I drove back to the quiet motel on the edge of town, the small, antique key a burning presence in my pocket. Sleep was impossible. I sat on the edge of the bed, the digital clock a relentless march of minutes toward dawn. I reread Alara's note, tracing the elegant loops of her handwriting. You are stronger than you know. It wasn't just a comfort, it was a challenge. And I was ready to meet it. By 5:30 a.m., I was back on the road, heading towards the Sterling estate once more, this time with a clear destination and a formidable purpose. The old study desk. The west wing. The double lock. Victor Sterling had tried to bury me, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. I had an ally, and now, I had the key. The Sterling estate was a monument to Victor's meticulous control, but even the most controlling men leave cracks in their facade. My pulse quickened as I approached the west wing, a part of the house rarely used, its windows perpetually draped in heavy velvet. The air inside was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of aged paper and polished wood. I located the old study desk, a massive mahogany piece with intricate carvings, exactly as Alara had described. My fingers brushed over the double lock on the third drawer down on the right. This was it, with the small, antique silver key from the robin-ornamented box. I carefully inserted it into the first lock. A soft click echoed in the silent room. Then, the second lock, its mechanism a little stiffer, yielded with another quiet snap. I pulled the drawer open, revealing not documents or cash, but a single, leather-bound journal. Its cover was embossed with a faded S for Sterling, and it felt heavy in my hands, imbued with the weight of untold secrets. As I opened the journal, a small, dried rose petal, a deep crimson, fell onto the polished wood of the desk. Its fragility belied the power of what it accompanied. The first few pages were filled with what appeared to be innocuous entries, notes on property acquisitions, market trends, and lists of influential contacts. Victor's handwriting, usually so precise and rigid, was looser here, almost hurried. But then, the entries shifted. My eyes widened as I read, a cold dread washing over me, quickly followed by a surge of righteous anger. The journal detailed a meticulously orchestrated scheme to acquire various smaller properties and family land parcels under duress. Victor had systematically targeted struggling landowners, often using his influence to create financial hardship for them, then swooping in to buy their assets for a fraction of their true worth. What truly stunned me were the entries pertaining to the Sterling heritage lands, a vast tract of untouched wilderness that bordered the main estate, a place I had always believed was protected by strict conservation easements. Victor had written about his plans to rezone sections of it for commercial development, circumventing legal protections through a series of shell corporations and, chillingly, by exploiting a legal loophole tied to an obscure, century-old family trust. The trust stipulated that if a direct Sterling heir with an active interest in conservation failed to oversee it, management would default to the head of the Sterling family, meaning Victor. The final entry, dated just a few months prior, sent a shiver down my spine. Amelia Davis, the weak link. Her attachment to the natural beauty of the heritage lands could be problematic. Must ensure she has no claim, no influence. David is easily swayed, Serafina is fully aligned. A public display of her instability, combined with legal disinheritance, should suffice. Eliminate all access points. He hadn't just humiliated me, he had planned it, systematically. He had perceived my genuine love for the natural world, my quiet advocacy for the conservation of the heritage lands, as a direct threat to his avarice. He feared my passion, my weakness, would somehow interfere with his grand design to exploit what should have been preserved. The public scorn at the award ceremony, the swift revocation of my trust access, it was all part of a calculated effort to render me powerless, to discredit my voice before I could ever truly speak. The journal wasn't just a diary, it was a confession, a detailed blueprint of his greed and manipulation, a testament to his willingness to trample over family legacy and environmental ethics for profit. I carefully photographed every relevant page with my phone, the clicks of the camera sounding deafening in the quiet room. Then, I replaced the journal, closing the drawer and locking it again. As I walked out of the study, the first rays of dawn pierced through the heavy curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, vengeful spirits. Victor Sterling had played a dangerous game, believing he held all the cards. But he had left the most crucial one, the ace of spades, hidden in plain sight, entrusted to the quiet wisdom of Alara, and now, to me, the scent of strong coffee and ozone filled the air of Evelyn Vance's office, a stark contrast to the musty old money smell of the Sterling estate. Evelyn, my former law school classmate, had since become one of the most formidable environmental and land use attorneys in the region. Her office, located in a modern high-rise downtown, boasted panoramic views of the city, but her gaze was fixed intently on the images on her tablet, each one a stark revelation from Victor's journal. "Amelia, this is astounding," Evelyn said, her voice a low murmur, the only sign of her usual composed demeanor faltering slightly. She scrolled through the photographed pages, her brow furrowed in concentration. Not just the disinheritance, which is straightforward, but the explicit intent to circumvent the Sterling heritage lands conservation easements. "This journal isn't just evidence of your father-in-law's character, it's a detailed confession of potential fraud and environmental violations." I leaned forward, clutching my coffee mug. He saw my interest in the land as a weakness, a problem. He thought if he cut me off financially and publicly humiliated me, I'd just disappear. But Alara, she gave me the key to finding this. I explained Alara's cryptic clue, the hidden bench, the wooden box, and the robin motif that linked to the Sterling family's lesser-known history as land stewards. "Not just developers," Evelyn nodded, her sharp eyes gleaming. "This changes everything. Your original battle was about your inheritance and reputation. Now, it's about exposing a massive corporate land grab that potentially violates multiple environmental protection statutes. The disinheritance of a spouse, while cruel, is harder to fight if it's legally executed. But this?" She tapped the tablet screen, highlighting an entry where Victor detailed a payout to a local zoning official. "This is a criminal matter. Bribery, fraud, intentional breach of trust for the heritage lands, it's all here. And your disinheritance was directly tied to preventing you from interfering with this scheme. So, what can we do?" I asked, a surge of adrenaline pushing away the lingering fear. Evelyn closed the tablet, her expression grim but determined. "First, we gather every last piece of collateral evidence. Are there any other documents, any communications, anything at all that corroborates what's in this journal? We need to build an unassailable case. Second, we focus on the Sterling heritage lands. The conservation easements on that property are legally binding. If we can prove he intended to violate them, and that he manipulated the family trust to gain control for that purpose, it's a direct challenge to his authority over the entire estate. Your disinheritance then becomes a critical piece of the motive." "He wrote that he wanted to eliminate all access points for me," I said, recalling Victor's chilling words in the journal. "He clearly believed cutting me off from the trust and humiliating me would make me abandon any fight. And that," Evelyn said, a steely glint in her eyes, "is where he made his biggest mistake. He provided the motive for everything else. We'll start by quietly reaching out to the environmental groups that originally helped establish those conservation easements. They'll have a vested interest in protecting the heritage lands. We'll also need to investigate the specific zoning changes he mentions, the shell corporations, and any unusual transactions related to the heritage lands in the past year. This isn't just a family dispute anymore, Amelia. This is a fight for justice, and Victor Sterling is about to learn that you don't mess with the land, or with a woman scorned." Armed with Evelyn's strategic insights and a newfound resolve, I knew my next move had to be carefully calculated. I couldn't afford to be emotional, I had to be precise. The initial confrontation wouldn't be a dramatic reveal, but a carefully placed stone meant to ripple through Victor's carefully cultivated calm. 2 days later, I found myself walking through the polished halls of Sterling and Company. Real estate, Victor's empire. The reception area was an opulent display of success, marble floors, soaring ceilings, and a massive oil painting of Victor himself, looking stern and imposing. The receptionist, a young woman with a perfectly coiffed bun, recognized me instantly. "Ms. Davis. Do you have an appointment?" Her voice held a hint of surprise, as if I were a ghost returning to haunt the living. "No, I don't," I replied calmly, my voice steady. "But I'm sure Mr. Sterling will want to see me. It's about family matters." My gaze lingered on the painting of Victor. He had always controlled the narrative, but now, I held the first draft of a new story. After a brief, tense exchange, I was led into a large, glass-walled conference room. Victor was already there, flanked by Serafina and their legal counsel, Mr. Maxwell Thorne, a man known for his ruthless efficiency. Victor looked up, his expression a mixture of irritation and veiled amusement. "Amelia. To what do we owe this unexpected visit? I thought we had made our positions quite clear." Serafina smirked, leaning back in her chair with an air of smug superiority. I didn't sit. I placed a single, unmarked manila envelope on the gleaming conference table. It wasn't thick, but its very presence seemed to suck the air out of the room. "I'm here to offer you a chance, Victor," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. "A chance to rectify some oversights." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Oversights? My dear, I believe all matters have been handled quite legally and definitively." "Have they?" I met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm referring to the Sterling heritage lands. And certain amendments to the family trust that seem designed to facilitate their exploitation." Mr. Thorne shifted, his gaze flicking between Victor and the envelope. Serafina's smirk faltered slightly. Victor, however, maintained his composure, though a flicker of something, perhaps concern, crossed his features. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Amelia. All our dealings are above board. The heritage lands are a family asset, to be managed responsibly." "Responsibly, or profitably?" I countered, my voice laced with steel. "I've learned a great deal recently about what responsible management means to you, Victor. And I believe the courts, and perhaps the environmental protection agencies, would find it enlightening." I pushed the envelope slightly towards him. "Inside this envelope, you'll find a single page. It's an excerpt from a document that outlines a very clear intent. Consider it a preview. This is your only warning, Victor. Stop. Cease all activities related to rezoning or developing the Sterling heritage lands. Reinstate my rightful place within the trust. Otherwise, what's coming next won't be a surprise like the one you gave me at your award ceremony. It will be a reckoning." Victor picked up the envelope, his fingers surprisingly steady. He opened it, pulling out a single, printed page. It was a photograph of a journal entry, a cryptic but damning reference to expediting rezoning through local officials and bypassing the environmental board. It contained no names, no dates, just enough to be an unnerving teaser. His eyes scanned the words, and for the first time, I saw a genuine crack in his impenetrable facade. It was fleeting, a quick tightening around his mouth, a sudden rigidity in his shoulders. Serafina, however, burst out laughing, a high-pitched, brittle sound. "Is this some kind of bad joke, Amelia? A ransom note? You think a single page from some old diary is going to scare my father? You're grasping at straws, trying to claw your way back in." I looked at her, then back at Victor, who had now regained his composure, though his eyes held a dangerous glint. "This isn't a joke, Serafina. And I'm not grasping. I'm building. And what I'm building will dismantle everything he believes he owns." I turned to leave. "You really want to drag this family through the mud, Amelia?" Victor's voice was low, menacing, a direct threat. "You'll regret this. I will make sure of it. I have nothing left to lose that you haven't already tried to take, Victor," I responded, my hand on the doorknob. "The only one who's going to regret anything here is you. Because I'm not afraid of the mud. I'm ready to dig." And with that, I walked out, leaving the chilling silence of the conference room and the stunned faces of the Sterling contingent behind me. I knew this was just the beginning. Victor Sterling, like any cornered predator, lashed out. My carefully placed preview had struck a nerve, and his retaliation was swift and insidious. He didn't come at me directly, not with legal threats right away. Instead, he chose the arena he understood best, public perception. A few days after my visit to his office, I started noticing the whispers. A casual coffee with an old acquaintance turned awkward when she subtly asked if I was doing okay after David's father's award ceremony. Then, a seemingly innocuous article appeared in the local society pages of the Savannah Chronicle, a publication that often served as Victor's unofficial mouthpiece. The piece, ostensibly about the Sterling family's philanthropic efforts, included a thinly veiled paragraph about the unfortunate stresses that personal relationships can place on even the strongest families. It hinted at emotional instability and unrealistic expectations from certain individuals who struggled to adapt to the demands of a prominent public life. My name wasn't mentioned, but the implication hung in the air like a noxious fume. Then came the direct hit. One morning, as I scrolled through my social media feed, a local gossip blog, notorious for its sensationalism and close ties to the city's elite, posted an unflattering photo of me taken secretly outside the Sterling offices during my confrontation with Victor. The caption was pure venom. Amelia Davis, unhinged? Sources close to the Sterling family expressed concern over Ms. Davis's erratic behavior and alleged attempts to undermine the family patriarch. Is this a case of an ambitious outsider struggling to fit in, or something more serious? Developing story, the comments exploded. People I knew, and many more I didn't, weighed in. Some expressed pity, others outright scorn. Gold digger trying to cause trouble, one read. Clearly unstable, can't handle the pressure, another echoed. The digital smear campaign was in full swing, designed to paint me as unhinged, irrational, and unworthy of any claim. It was an attempt to discredit my character, to make any truth I spoke sound like the ravings of a disgruntled woman. David, bless his heart, was horrified. He called me, his voice tight with frustration. Amelia, what is going on? My father is furious, and Serafina is fueling this. They're telling everyone you're having some kind of breakdown. You have to deny it, or something. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. Denying it won't work, David. This is Victor's move. He wants me to look crazy so no one believes me when I expose him. This isn't about me fitting in. It's about him silencing me so he can destroy the heritage lands. Later that day, a formal letter arrived from Mr. Thorne, Victor's lawyer. It was a thinly veiled cease and desist, threatening legal action for defamation and harassment if I continued to spread baseless accusations and interfere with Sterling family affairs. It was a classic power play: intimidate, isolate, and then crush. They were pushing hard, trying to make me fold under the pressure, to retreat into silence. But they had miscalculated. The public humiliation, the financial disinheritance, and now the character assassination, each blow had only hardened my resolve. I had nothing left to lose by fighting, and everything to gain by winning. The onslaught of the public smear campaign felt like a physical weight, but beneath it, a new kind of strength was forging. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let them define me. Instead, I channeled my anger into methodical action, fueled by Evelyn's steady guidance. They're trying to isolate you, Amelia, Evelyn had told me over the phone. This is standard operating procedure for powerful people trying to suppress a threat. But it also tells us they're worried. If they weren't, they wouldn't bother with the dirty tactics. We needed more. More than just Victor's journal, compelling as it was. We needed undeniable, external proof of his manipulative efforts, especially regarding the heritage lands. My focus shifted from merely defending my reputation to building an unshakable case against his larger scheme. I started with the zoning official mentioned in Victor's journal. It was a long shot, but Evelyn advised me to check public records for any unusual or expedited zoning changes for areas bordering the heritage lands. It was tedious work, hours spent poring over online county records, until I found it, a land parcel adjacent to the heritage lands, rezoned from agricultural to commercial with startling speed 6 months prior. The official who signed off on it? A Mr. Wallace Sims, who had recently retired under a cloud of health issues. More importantly, a small, independent newspaper, the Savannah Sentinel, had run a brief, almost buried article questioning the speed of that specific rezoning and hinting at unusual financial transactions involving an anonymous shell company. The article never named Victor, but it painted a clear picture. My next step was to contact the reporter who wrote that article, Sarah Chen. She was initially wary, having been shut down previously, but when I cautiously revealed I had information about the Sterling heritage lands and Mr. Sims, her journalistic instincts kicked in. We met in a discreet coffee shop, and I showed her selected, redacted portions of Victor's journal, enough to pique her interest and confirm her suspicions. Sarah, it turned out, had kept meticulous notes and had a network of her own. She quietly dug deeper, confirming that Mr. Sims had indeed received a substantial, undeclared, consulting fee from a holding company with strong, albeit indirect, ties to Sterling and Company. It wasn't a smoking gun yet, but it was a very warm barrel. Then a stroke of pure serendipity arrived. Remembering Alara's constant vigilance, I went back to the Sterling estate, not to the study, but to the small, rarely used guest cottage where Alara often stayed when she didn't want to be in the main house. It was locked, but a discreet hidden key, another of Alara's secrets, was tucked under a loose stone in the garden. Inside, it smelled faintly of lavender and old books. On her nightstand, tucked beneath a stack of well-worn novels, I found a small, meticulously organized ledger. It wasn't a financial ledger, but a property watch log. Alara, with her keen mind and her long-held distrust of Victor's avarice, had been tracking suspicious activities related to the Sterling heritage lands for years, the ledger detailed. Not only the dates of Victor's clandestine meetings with zoning officials but also recorded various unusual visits to the heritage lands by surveyors and, crucially, environmental impact assessment teams that were abruptly pulled from projects without clear reason. There were also entries about unusual financial transactions from accounts linked to Serafina and Marcus, seemingly unrelated to their declared incomes, all routed through obscure offshore entities. One entry specifically mentioned a payment to a small, private security firm for surveillance services, with a date corresponding precisely to the time the defamatory social media post about me had appeared. Alara had been quietly gathering intelligence, meticulously documenting Victor's deceit, and her foresight was now my greatest asset. This wasn't just a pattern. It was a conspiracy. The journal revealed the intent, Sarah's reporting linked the official, and Alara's ledger provided the precise dates, the financial trail, and a shocking revelation about the origin of the smear campaign against me. They weren't just trying to discredit me, they were actively paying for my downfall. I photographed every page of the ledger, my hands steady, my resolve ironclad. The pieces were now falling into place, forming an undeniable portrait of Victor Sterling's ruthlessness and his willingness to break laws to achieve his goals. The morning of the hearing dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within the hallowed walls of the courthouse. I wore a simple, elegant dark suit, my silver bracelet the only adornment, a quiet reminder of David and the life I was fighting for. Evelyn, a force of nature in a power suit, walked beside me, her briefcase a silent weapon. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from a potent cocktail of anticipation and righteous fury. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, but packed. Victor sat at his table, impeccably dressed, his face a mask of controlled arrogance. Serafina was beside him, her expression a mix of icy disdain and nervous energy. Mr. Thorne, their lawyer, exuded a smug confidence, his legal pad filled with what he surely believed were impenetrable arguments. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with piercing eyes, called the hearing to order. Mr. Thorne rose first, his voice smooth and practiced. Your Honor, we are here today to address the baseless and defamatory claims made by Ms. Amelia Davis against Mr. Victor Sterling and the Sterling Family Trust. Ms. Davis has demonstrated a pattern of emotional instability, evidenced by her public outbursts and unwarranted accusations, and has no legal standing to challenge the long-established and legally sound family trust. He presented the social media posts, the article from the Savannah Chronicle, and the cease and desist letter he'd sent, painting a picture of me as a troubled, vindictive outsider. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She rose, her presence commanding, her voice clear and precise. Your Honor, we anticipate Mr. Thorne's attempts to discredit my client. However, this is not a character assassination, this is an exposure of systemic fraud and a deliberate breach of fiduciary duty. My client's alleged instability is, in fact, a manufactured narrative, designed to silence her and conceal Mr. Sterling's illicit activities concerning the Sterling heritage lands. Evelyn then began to systematically dismantle their case. First, she presented Victor's journal, its damning entries projected onto a screen for everyone to see. She highlighted the specific lines detailing his intent to exploit the heritage lands and his plan to eliminate all access points for me, proving motive for my disinheritance. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom as the words became visible. Next, Evelyn called Sarah Chen to the stand. Sarah, looking poised and professional, testified about her investigation into the fast-tracked zoning change and the unusual payments to Mr. Sims, providing a paper trail that linked the rezoning to a shell corporation with ties to Sterling and Company. The judge's expression tightened. Then, the final, devastating blow. Evelyn introduced Alara Sterling's ledger. It was meticulously organized, detailing every suspicious meeting, every aborted environmental assessment, and crucially, the payments made by Serafina and Marcus through their offshore accounts to the private security firm for surveillance services that coincided with the timing of the smear campaign against me. The courtroom gasped. Victor's face, for the first time, crumpled, his mask of arrogance dissolving into a raw fury. Serafina looked pale, her eyes darting nervously. Your Honor, Evelyn concluded, her voice ringing with conviction, "This is not merely a family dispute over inheritance. This is a meticulously planned scheme of fraud, bribery, and character defamation, orchestrated by Mr. Victor Sterling and actively aided by his daughter, Ms. Serafina Sterling, to illegally exploit protected land and silence anyone who stood in their way." Ms. Davis was not unhinged, she was targeted. And the evidence, documented by Mr. Sterling himself and corroborated by his own mother, is undeniable. The judge leaned forward, her gaze piercing Victor. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice grave, "the evidence presented here suggests a pattern of behavior that goes far beyond a simple family disagreement. Given the serious nature of these allegations, and the compelling evidence, I am ruling that all actions taken by Mr. Victor Sterling, Ms. Serafina Sterling, and Mr. Marcus Thorne regarding the Sterling Family Trust and the Sterling Heritage Lands are hereby frozen pending a full criminal investigation." She brought her gavel down. A sharp, decisive crack that echoed through the stunned silence of the courtroom. Furthermore, Ms. Amelia Davis's beneficiary status to the Sterling Family Trust is provisionally reinstated until the full extent of this manipulation can be legally determined. Victor lunged forward, restrained by Mr. Thorne, his face contorted in a silent scream of rage. Serafina looked as though she might faint. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat. I simply exhaled, a deep, cleansing breath. The truth, finally, had been heard. The gavel's crack reverberated in the stunned silence of the courtroom, a final, emphatic punctuation mark on a chapter of my life I thought would never end. I didn't move immediately, simply sitting there, allowing the weight of the moment to settle upon me. Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on my arm, her smile, usually so composed, now radiant with triumph. Victor, however, remained a figure of seething fury, restrained by a visibly shaken Mr. Thorne, his eyes burning into me with pure, unadulterated hatred. Serafina sat beside him, pale and rigid, the perfect veneer of her life having just shattered into 1,000 pieces. As the judge exited the courtroom, a low hum of chatter erupted. I could hear whispers of felony, fraud, and Sterling's downfall. Reporters, who had been discreetly present, now began to scramble, their cameras flashing, their pens scratching furiously. This wasn't just a family squabble, it was a major scandal about to rock Savannah's elite. I rose slowly, the ache in my muscles a testament to the years of silent struggle. I gathered my folders, the meticulous evidence now vindicated. As I passed Victor's table, he leaned forward, his voice a low, guttural snarl. "You've destroyed everything, Amelia. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." I stopped, turning just enough to meet his gaze, my own eyes calm and steady. "No, Victor," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet resonating with conviction. "You destroyed everything the moment you chose greed over integrity. I just exposed it." I continued walking, leaving him to seethe in his self-made prison. Outside the courtroom, the humid Savannah air felt different, cleaner. The tension that had clung to me for months, years even, finally dissipated. There were no grand pronouncements, no celebratory shouts, just the quiet click of my heels on the pavement and the persistent whir of cameras. A few sympathetic glances from courthouse staff, a nod of respect from a passing lawyer, these were my true accolades. Evelyn squeezed my hand. "You did it, Amelia. You faced down a titan, and you won." The drive back to the small motel on the edge of town was filled with a serene quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. My mind replayed the judge's words, the gasp from the courtroom, the look on Victor's face when Alara's ledger was revealed. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a profound personal triumph. For so long, I had felt invisible, a tangential figure in the grand Sterling narrative. Victor had tried to erase me, to define me by his contempt. But I had refused. I had dug for the truth, unearthed it, and now, my voice, once dismissed as unstable, had brought down an empire built on deceit. When I finally reached the motel, the familiar room felt different. No longer a temporary refuge, it was a launching pad. I dropped my briefcase on the small table, then walked to the mirror. I looked at my reflection, not with the exhaustion of defeat, but with the quiet strength of resilience. The woman staring back was no longer defined by humiliation or betrayal. She was Amelia, the woman who fought for what was right, who honored a legacy beyond money, and who, in the face of immense pressure, found her own unshakable ground. I picked up the small wooden robin, its smooth surface now a symbol of quiet triumph rather than a cryptic clue. Alara had given me more than a key, she had given me a belief in my own ability to uncover truth. My inheritance wasn't just the trust, or the land, it was the profound realization of my own inner power. I knew the legal battles weren't entirely over, freezing assets and launching investigations would be a lengthy process. But the foundational lie had been exposed. The public narrative had shifted. And I, Amelia, was no longer a discarded outsider. I was a force. That evening, I ate a simple meal alone, not out of loneliness, but out of a deep sense of peace. The phone buzzed, a text from David. Amelia, I just heard. I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry for everything. Are you okay? My heart softened slightly. The path forward with David would be complicated, but at least now, it would be built on truth, not Victor's carefully constructed lies. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I truly felt free. The dust hadn't quite settled from the court's decision, but the seismic shift it created was undeniable. Days later, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. It was David. His voice, usually so confident, was hesitant, laced with a raw vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. Amelia, he started, can we talk? Properly? We met at a small, unassuming cafe, far from the Sterling family's usual haunts. David looked drawn, tired, the weight of his father's public downfall clearly affecting him. I can't believe it, he said, pushing a sugar packet around on the table. My father. All of it. The land, the trust, the way he treated you. I had no idea. I genuinely didn't. He always said you were troubled. That you just didn't understand the family business. He manipulated you, David, I said gently, just like he tried to manipulate everyone else. He used your loyalty against you. David nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on some distant point. I feel like an idiot. And I feel sick about how he treated you. The award ceremony, the social media attacks. I just stood by, believing him. I'm so sorry, Amelia. Truly sorry. His apology, unprompted and heartfelt, was a balm to a wound I hadn't realized was still so open. It wasn't about excusing his inaction, but about acknowledging the profound impact of his father's deceit on both our lives. We talked for hours, not about the legal battle, but about our marriage, about the subtle ways Victor's influence had strained our relationship, about the unspoken expectations and the constant feeling of being an outsider that I had carried. Alara knew, I told him, recounting his grandmother's quiet support and the cryptic clues that led me to Victor's journal and her own meticulously kept ledger. She trusted me when no one else did. A sad smile touched David's lips. Grandma. Alara always saw things clearly. She often told my father he was losing his way, but he never listened. He paused, then looked at me, his gaze direct. This isn't what I wanted for us, Amelia. For our life. For our future. I know things are complicated now. But if you'd consider it, I want to try and rebuild. Not his way. Our way. His sincerity resonated. The path forward wouldn't be easy. The public fallout from Victor's actions would be immense, and our marriage had been deeply scarred. But David's willingness to see the truth, to admit his blindness, offered a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a sudden, fairy tale ending, but a tentative step towards healing, towards a future where our relationship could be built on honesty. Not the manipulative foundation of the Sterling patriarch. The aftermath of the court's ruling sent shockwaves through Savannah. News headlines screamed of Victor Sterling's downfall, of environmental fraud and a family ripped apart by greed. The Sterling and Company building, once a symbol of unassailable power, now seemed to shrink under the weight of public scrutiny. The criminal investigation was underway, and Victor, Serafina, and Marcus were facing serious charges. Justice, though slow, was taking its course. For me, the victory wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in reclaiming my own narrative. The public perception of me shifted dramatically. The woman once painted as unhinged was now lauded as a whistleblower and a champion of integrity. Environmental groups reached out, eager to collaborate on projects to truly protect the Sterling heritage lands, ensuring Victor's exploitative plans would never see the light of day. It was a vindication not just of my claims, but of my inherent values. David and I started seeing a counselor, painstakingly navigating the complexities of rebuilding trust and redefining our relationship away from the shadow of his family's legacy. It was hard, slow work, but for the first time, it felt genuine. We were building something new, brick by brick, on a foundation of open communication and shared values, not inherited expectations. One sunny morning, I drove to the Sterling heritage lands. The untouched wilderness stretched out before me, ancient trees reaching for the sky, a pristine river winding through the landscape. This land, the very thing Victor had tried to sacrifice for profit, was now truly safe. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a spiritual one. I walked to a quiet spot near the riverbank, a place I had always loved. From my pocket, I pulled out the small wooden robin Alara had given me. It felt lighter now, its purpose fulfilled. I found a smooth, flat stone and placed the robin carefully upon it, a silent tribute to Alara's wisdom and quiet strength. Then, I unzipped my backpack and pulled out a small bag of lavender seeds. Remembering Dad's words, and the power of planting roots, I knelt on the rich earth. When it's all gone, he'd said, plant something. That's how you stay. This was my staying, my act of rebuilding. As I pressed the tiny seeds into the soil, my fingers felt the cool, damp earth, alive with promise. I wasn't planting for profit, or power, or status. I was planting for healing, for continuity, for a legacy that honored nature and truth. My inheritance wasn't just the land or the trust. It was the strength to defend it, the peace to rebuild it, and the choice to plant something beautiful where they tried to bury me. My hands, once clenched in fury, were now open, sowing seeds of hope. And as the sun warmed my face, I knew, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning of my new story. David gave a small, almost shy smile, a flash of the husband I had once believed in. Then he drifted away to tend to his responsibilities, blending into the quiet hum of the cafe. I stayed a moment longer, savoring the warmth of my coffee and the quiet turning of something inside me. Later, when the city lights began to twinkle across the river, a reminder that life kept moving forward whether we clung to the past or not, I stood on my small motel room balcony. The air was cool and clean, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the courtroom. I raised my glass to the sky, a silent toast. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't given in words, it's shown in who we become. Sometimes the deepest victories are the quiet ones, when we choose growth over pride, and peace over being right. In every family drama, there's a choice, to stay trapped in old wounds, or to build something stronger from them. What about you? Have you ever found healing where you least expected it?